Thank you everybody and thank you for coming. It's just about presenting this new European project we started kind of 6 months ago, and it's called Open Cities, and then I would like to introduce it a little bit to you and what we're trying to do there. Well, the objectives of Open Cities are very simple, but we have two dual objectives. On one side, what we want to do is to translate open innovation to the public sector. Many of you probably know about open innovation. Open innovation is now the standard in innovation management in the companies. However, it has been translated to other areas like services and so on. However, the translation to the public sector is still lacking. We don't have it. So one of the things that we want to do is to explore this translation. And we want to explore this translation by making pilots. Pilots in different type of areas, and making pilots especially in the type of mechanisms that are not so common in the private sector. And there are mechanisms that are pretty specific to a public sector. Mechanisms like crowdsourcing, open data that, well, here we are talking a lot about that. Things like living labs are popular in the private sector too, but special implementations of living labs like urban labs, and so on. So these are the two objectives of the project, this translation and making pilots. Pilots that we hope, and we are beginning to work on, to make pan-European pilots on all these areas and learn something about innovation in the public sector. These are the partners. We have several cities in Europe. We have, beginning from the top, we have Helsinki, Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, Barcelona, and then on the other side we have London-Nesta and Rome. We also have quite a lot of some associates in the project that want to work on that. One of the associates will probably be the Open Knowledge Foundation that we are here, and this is the configuration. We are really lucky to have first all these cities and then all these institutions like Fraunhofer, Back Society, Atos, and so on. How we plan to do this translation of open innovation to the public sector? In terms of the project, in terms to see how the project is structured, it's pretty simple. We have one part of the project that is devoted to this theoretical setting of how we implement open innovation in the public sector, and then the pilots. And the pilots we have divided by different packages. One is urban labs, and we will see a few examples of what we are doing in each pilot. One is urban labs, that is the implementation of living labs in cities. It's an implementation. Each city leads more or less one of the pilots. Urban labs is led by Barcelona. The other is crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing probably you all know about because it has been so popular. Amsterdam leads crowdsourcing. In open data, we have two main things. We have a platform that we are building, and we are trying to collaborate with a different type with intention to elaborate on the existing platform, but also we have lots of pilots. In open data, almost everybody's open data is led by Fraunhofer. Open fiber networks is fiber to the home. The idea is pretty simple. We're going to develop in a moment, but it's very simple. If we have fiber and that connects homes, loops of fiber, if we open that to different companies, profits and non-profits, probably we can put apps the same way that we can put apps that we have apps in Android or the iPhone and so on, or we have apps in the open data. And with these apps, we can create kind of services that are not possible in other type of situations because of the bandwidth. Because of the bandwidth that we have in fiber is bigger than the bandwidth that we have in other type of networks. And finally, we have open sensor networks led by Barcelona, where we have around 5,000 sensors covering the whole city in a population that covers a population more or less of 1.5 million people and so on. We want to take advantage of these sensors and then try to integrate that with open data. So that's the project, more or less, and here you have a conceptual view of how it works. Let me show a few implementations. This is one of the urban labs, and these are some of the pilots that we are doing. The idea of urban labs is very simple. It's translating living labs to cities. So cities provide a space where companies or public organizations, for profit or non-for-profit, can experiment, in this case, with physical things, with physical objects. And here is an example. Here is an example about, it's a company, it's called Biotica, that went into these urban labs and is experimenting on containers for trash. And then the idea is very simple. We don't have to pick up a container if the container is empty. But for that, we have to know when the container is empty or not. So they are deploying this type of sensors. This is one type of sensor. So that tries to catch, that tries to get if the container is empty or is not empty. So if it's empty, don't pick it up, and if it's not empty, pick it up. We did quite a lot of experimentation on that, and finally the sensor is for volume. Before it was for weight. And then for weight was not a clear indication if it was empty or not, because depending on what is in the container, we had some. And now finally we have this type of thing on volume. We have around 50 projects in this pipeline that range from simple things like this to LLD illuminations to electric car, electric motorbike, and so on. The idea is to test that with 2 constituencies. This is the methodology in a schema that we use. The idea is to test that with 2 constituencies, with users, and then with companies and the city halls, and then try to get, try to improve the products using this type of methodology. Crowdsourcing is led by Amsterdam, and this is one of the examples of crowdsourcing in Amsterdam that they have been doing and have been working. Again, they created a pretty elaborated methodology on how to work on that, how to involve users, how to involve city halls, how to involve intermediaries and constituencies. They have quite a lot of examples, and they have even a chain or process of how to work on this thing on crowdsourcing. If you want to know more about the implementation of crowdsourcing, tomorrow there is a session, tomorrow in the evening there is a session by Katalin Galias that did all this, that is the one who is leading in Amsterdam all this part of the project on crowdsourcing. Open data, we have many things. We had here in Berlin the Apps for Berlin competition. This is the Apps for Amsterdam competition. So we are leading quite a lot of competitions, and we are planning to do a pan-European competition next year. What is different about the competitions that we are doing in the project to the competitions that exist in open data? Probably this is a good example in Apps for Amsterdam of what is different. Trying to involve the different constituencies, trying to involve the people from the start on, from the first idea of the competition, especially hackers, especially developers, and so on, and trying to involve them with the ones in the city hall that are the ones who are selecting the data. We think that this involvement is important. Also, we are working on a platform, on a software platform for open data, that has some semantic elements and so on. Fraunhofer in Berlin, Fraunhofer Focus, is the leader on this part. And we are working in a companion platform, in an add-on to this platform for sensor networks. Sensor networks are a little bit different because the data is continuous, it's not static. So it's a flux of data that comes. It's a stream of data that you have to capture, and you need different APIs, and you need different ways to deal with this type of data. This is the thing that we're doing with fiber to the home. This network of fiber that is in Paris, now it connects around 2,500 households. And these are some of the competitions. If you want to see, they are pan-European competitions, they are just opened. So the idea is that in this type of network, you can put apps that can take advantage of this enormous bandwidth. Apps that can range for entertainment to things like telemedicine and so on, where you can have high definition teleconference, high definition consultations, and so on for elderly people or whatever. It's quite open. The idea here is to leverage on companies that can provide these high quality services and then can develop this type of networks. I would like just to finalize a bit to explain a little bit what is the philosophy behind the project, or what we are trying to do behind the project. The project draws on the conception that city halls, that the public sector, should probably work for being a service provider, somebody that we give taxes and provide services, to something like a platform orchestrator, something like we are used to see in the private sector, like Apple or like many other platforms that exist, where the point is not providing just services, but the point is like how you can mobilize different constituencies in a whole ecosystem. In this case, an ecosystem that would be of for-profit and not-for-profit companies and private people in order to build applications or to build services. This is a pretty important change, because if you think of the conception of a government as a service provider, then the relevant question is which type of services and who has the priority, who we prioritize. It's a zero-sum game. I mean, you have an amount of money, whatever it is, and then you have to distribute it. If you look at the government as a platform orchestrator, this changed completely. It's no longer a zero-sum game. You can leverage on whatever you have, and a good example is open data, where you leverage on the data in order to create services that can be created not by you and not by taxpayers' money, but with different types of business models, whatever they are. So this has also a lot of implications when we go to implementation. That's why we insist a lot in things like co-development in open data, and so on, because all these implications exist, and this is probably what we want to explore in the project. This is the idea or the type of things that we want to explore in the project. One of the implications that are interesting in open innovation is intermediaries. Open innovation solves the problem of sourcing ideas, of finding new ideas, by opening the space of ideas to the whole world. The ideas don't have to be sourced internally, but can be sourced everywhere. But by solving this problem creates a huge problem. Well, which ideas to select, where to find them? If the space of solutions is as big as the whole world, then solving this problem is not as easy as it was when the space of solutions was the ideas that you have inside the company, which is pretty limited. In order to solve these type of problems, you have intermediaries in open innovation in the private sector, people like Innocentive, people, all these type of things, that specialize in solving these new type of problems created by the methodology. Well, we want to explore the same thing. One of the things that we are doing is exploring the same thing in the public sector. In the public sector, we also have different type of problems. One of the problems that we have is how you activate civic networks, or how you create civic marketplaces, or how you engage communities. Probably all these problems that are novel if you try to open the concept of innovation beyond the boundaries of what happens inside the city hall, and you open that to the society, are difficult to be solved by a city hall. Because the cognitive distance between a city hall and hackers is just too high. I mean, it's difficult for them to talk to each other, just to put a normal example. So you have this concept of intermediaries. Intermediaries that has a different type of functions. In urban labs, the intermediaries is how to experiment and convert and transform the urban space in places of experimentation. In open data is how to create a marketplace for data, or in other places like in crowdsourcing and so on is how to bridge this cognitive space. The final idea is no other than created civic marketplaces. Civic marketplaces where you can have and you can trade, and these marketplaces trying to be at least pan-European, if possible global, where the solution doesn't have to be reinvented by every city hall and can be reused by all city halls, or in general by all public governments, instead of being reinvented as it is now. We have quite a lot of implications on policy, and well, here are some of them, which are pretty different from the ones that we had in a closed innovation mindset. Openness is probably one of the most relevant, but these are things that we are just working. What are the next steps, or the immediate next steps? Well, in the next 12 months, we plan first to do all these pan-European platforms. We have been doing experiments in crowdsourcing, urban labs, and so on, but in each city. Now we want to do a pan-European ones. Probably we will begin in the first quarter of next year with open data and urban labs. In urban labs in November. In November, Barcelona we will start. In the fiber to the home we already started, and so on. In diffusion, the project has been pretty happy, pretty nice, pretty interesting. We had quite a lot of diffusion, and we are trying to get more diffusion. Around the platforms, we want to evolve them, the different platforms that we are creating in the project, the one for open data, the one for crowdsourcing, and in general, in our understanding of what open innovation in the public sector could be and how to translate it, we want also to learn a little bit more. So that is it. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions? Maybe we have 1 minute. Yeah, please.
What are you doing exactly with crowdsourcing in a community?
Well,
what I understand is, let's say you collect money for a good idea, and here, let's say that budget is coming from the people outside.
Yeah, crowdsourcing is not crowdfunding. I mean, we want to introduce crowdfunding this year, but we didn't do anything with crowdfunding. In crowdsourcing, if you are very interested, tomorrow at 5:30, there is a session with Katalin Gallias, that is the leader of the crowdsourcing package in Amsterdam. And then you will have a big session only about crowdsourcing. Well, basically the idea is, again, how to mobilize communities. Crowdsourcing has been talking about how to get ideas, and this has been crowdsourcing for many years. Well, probably if we go beyond just this getting ideas, and we write and we try to involve communities, and we try to go to the incentives beyond the individual level and go into the group level and try making them to participate in the city somehow, and getting this type of involvement, probably we can get much more. This is more or less the direction that they are working, and they are very active. And this is one direction. Another direction is how to transform the city hall into a more crowdsourcing friendly, into something that is more open to the ideas of the citizens, which is not as simple as it sounds once you go inside any city hall in the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. More questions? Please.
2 questions. One is, if you consider the fact that in many new forms of collaboration and production, what appears relevant is that many resources exchange don't pass through monetary exchange. So if you frame this issue and how you deal with this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is if in your approach you ever consider the commons as a framework to help to redesign problem solutions, etc.
But one of the most interesting intermediaries that is happening now is Code for America and Civic Commons. And both deal with commons, both deal with voluntary work. And this is happening on the other side of the Atlantic, but well, the other side of the Atlantic exists too. So, and Code for America basically is it's a copy of Teach for America. It's a translation of Teach for America for the public sector. I mean, they ask volunteers that want to work in making applications, and then they ask to work for 1 or 2 years in a very basic salary, and then make applications collaboratively for 2, 3, or 4 city halls. And well, this is a marketplace, but a marketplace that is more about interchange than about making money. Probably all marketplaces that we are dealing with, especially in the public sector, are more marketplace seen as interchanges. It's a way to assign resources. That's the basic of the interchange. That is a way to obtain profit. We have profit. I mean, we have companies too, of course. But in the public sector, because of the interest and so on, commons play a huge role. Everything that we are dealing, open data, fiber to the home, and so on, somehow, always deals with commons. And then in every aspect that we are dealing, we have companies, but we have non-profit institutions and individuals that are there just because other type of motivations. So yes, of course, this is for us a huge part. We just put a project on this, in this line a few months ago to the European Union. I don't know if that helps. But we don't know much more. I mean, it's something that is being developed. This idea of open government, it's pretty new. Government as a platform, it's a pretty new idea. So mechanisms, ways, how to deal, how to motivate, how to exchange and transact into the marketplace is not something as obvious as in the normal private marketplace, but money dominates and the transactions and the incentives. But here is more than money, of course, sure. Sure, definitely. Please.
I have a question about the governance of these projects. one-off initiative of the EU, or how is it embedded in the civil society later on? Who owns and drives this initiative? Is it embedded in the local government or in the city?
Well, the framework of these European projects is pretty set. I mean, there is an objective. The European Union puts an objective, and then a group of a consortium presents to this type of project. In this case, the consortium was one of the first slides that we showed. This was the consortium that presented the proposal to this objective. Once you have that, you get a project, you get some money, co-finance, in this case 50%, co-financed by the European Union for a period of time that is 3 years. And this is how it works. And then you have to develop what was in the proposal, and then at the point it ends. I mean, it's a very set framework that is the one that the European Union uses for these type of things, and that's it. This is why we're trying to also link to initiatives like the Open Knowledge Foundation and so on, because we want to translate a little bit beyond this. Well, we have a project, it's going to last 3 years, and then so what? And that's why we think it's important to link to these initiatives that are longer in time than a project that is very set on what it begins and what it ends, when it ends, more or less.
We've probably got time for one or two more, unless Jonathan is here already. No, yeah, one or two more questions is fine.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned the two different roles, or two different concepts for government or public administration. That one is public administration or government is a service provider, and you sort of indicated that you would like to see it in a new role as what you call platform orchestrator.
Sure.
Now, there are very different services, of course. You've got social services, you've got infrastructure services. So I also would like to see a little bit more now what that new role exactly is as platform orchestrator. Does it mean that the public sector should get privatized? Is that sort of a direction you see, or is it confined to a certain particular sector, subsector, within the entire?
No, I understand the point. I mean, what is the difference between this and the ultra-liberal approach of let's get rid of the public sector and let's privatize everything?
That's sort of a little bit of a political thing, yes.
The idea of a platform manager or a platform orchestrator or whatever you want to call it, we put orchestrator, can be manager, is basically trying to copy what is happening in the digital business. Trying to copy what Apple, Microsoft, all these people are doing. I mean, if you buy, for example, an iPhone nowadays, you probably don't buy an iPhone because of the device. The device is not the best one. You buy an iPhone because the value is created by the whole ecosystem. Mostly third-party vendors that have nothing to do with Apple. But Apple managed to manage all this ecosystem and align them in the same direction. But these are platforms. Platforms have been operating in the private sector for many years. And there we know how to manage platforms in the private sector. We know how to align objectives, how to make the governance of these platforms, all this part of the revenue sharing agreements that you have in the platform. We know all that in the private sector. The idea is how to translate that to the public sector. And this is not obvious. Because in the public sector, you will have more things than for-profit organizations. You will have more things than companies. You will have commons, you will have non-for-profit, you will have citizens, you will have many other things that want to play a role in the public sector and have the right to play a role. So it's not as obvious and as an easy. We don't know many of the answers. But it's not about, yes, let's privatize everything, and that's it, because that wouldn't leave room for non-profits or citizens, so it's more than that. And this is what we're trying to find in the project, some of these answers. We are beginning to know a few of them, like, for example, the need of these type of intermediaries that are different from the ones that we have in the private sector, that bridge between communities, but we don't know all of them. That's for sure. Maybe in 1 year I can say more. Maybe.
Is there any more?
And about these intermediaries,
Mhm.
how would you describe the characteristics that you think are emerging?
Yeah.
Qualify an intermediary in that?
Yeah. One group of intermediaries is the ones who bridge communities, who bridge this cognitive gap. This is very obvious, for example, in hackers or developers community, where the distance between what the city hall thinks and what the hackers community thinks is huge. So trying to get ways of understanding. Here we have some examples. In Amsterdam, the Back Society, for example, is one that works in this direction, and so on. We don't have so many. Probably our Open Knowledge Foundation works in this direction too. We don't have so many. But they try to manage projects that exist for the city hall and involve a community. Another role that they have is to activate this community and maintain the community as a network. If you don't maintain a community as a network, you cannot activate it for anything. So that means that you have to maintain the network, make activities, etc., all these type of things. Another type of intermediary, another type of communities that are normally exist, and this is huge, is bigger in the number of intermediaries, are the ones that deal with companies. And this exists in almost every city. In almost every city, you have a kind of intermediary that deals with private companies and maintains a network of SMEs, innovative companies, and so on. Again, in Amsterdam will be Amsterdam Innovation Motor, in Barcelona will be Barcelona Digital, in Helsinki will be Forum Videum, you name it. But this, normally they are participated by some kind of city hall that bridge communities, that bridge the city hall or the public sector with companies, particularly SMEs, particularly in the digital sector. What they do is more or less the same thing, but in a different area. They maintain the network, they activate the network, they try to reach and create projects, and so on. These are two ones. A new one, for example, is the one that tries to, it's called For America, that tries to get contributions from volunteers and put this contribution in a way that can be useful for the public sector, or cities, societies, and so on. This is a new idea, a new invention. But we are working on that. The ones that we found now are these 3 different types of categories, but we will find more.
Okay, so I think unfortunately time's up for questions, but just give us a round of applause, and I'm sure we'll be happy to speak to anyone with more questions later.
Thank you.